It's transcribing in US English, it says.
Yeah, I got the recording started.
Okay, so we've started. Right. Who have we got? Okay, right. This is. I've got some echo there. I don't know whether somebody's. What I'm going to do is mute you all. And Val, if you can unmute, you should be all right.
Hopefully the echo's not me.
Right. So welcome. Well, if it's worth saying, it's worth saying again, isn't it? That's what I say about echoes. So it's probably good if we have. But no, that appears to have gone away. Good. I would therefore like to welcome you to this first global conversation club, including CPM, the College of Performance Management, starring their invisible logo today. It's a concealed logo that we're operating for CPM today, but it is definitely there. And along with Becky Winston, the president of CPM, College of Performance Management in the US, this is a global tariff-free think tank conversation with like-minded souls, people who are interested in all matters to do with projects, and with some of the leading speakers of the day. So I'd like, without further hesitation, to welcome Val Jonas of Risk Ecosystems Limited, used to be Risk Decisions. I was looking back, Val, at the first time I met you, and that goes back to 2008. What a memory. 2000, aligning risk and earned value management.
Yes, indeed. Mind you, we were working on that in 2005. But
was it?
But maybe we met in 2008.
Well, let's say 2005 then. When it was published in 2008, I've just checked my PDF copy of it. It actually had telephone, email, and facsimile number on the back of the book to show you how bloody old it is. What's a facsimile? And so very happy that you've come along. I've got to know Val very well over the years, and she is definitely a subject matter expert and a fine supporter and what's the word? I would say very committed in the right in the right sense of the word to all we do in terms of progressing the profession and bringing risk to our attentions. When I started years ago, risk was a separate topic entirely, and it didn't really get included on projects until after they'd started, and then the risk people would come in and tell you what you're doing wrong. But far more integrated. So hopefully we are going to be looking at that now. Her opening sentence, New Year 2026, and we are experiencing more shockwaves globally. And she said that at the new year of 2026. So God knows what shockwaves we're experiencing at the moment, although I will say no more about that. And without further ado, the time has come when we need to think differently on how to navigate risk, issues and uncertainty. And on that, Val, welcome. The floor is yours. But we encourage conversation. If you want to chip in, put your hand up. Then we'd like for it to become a conversation rather than a set of slides. Off you go, Val.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for inviting me, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate everybody's busy, and so giving up your time is really fantastic. So, Steve, just checking. I've got 3 questions that I want people to join in with. How long are we expecting to this? How long have we got people for?
Well, formally we run till 5 o'clock, but we have often been here at 9.
Yeah.
But
okay.
We can definitely run on after 5 if needs be.
Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Well, 10, I'm expecting. I do my best to keep on time.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Right. So I've only got a few slides. I am going to set the scene. And as I said, we've got 3 questions. I just need to make sure you're aware at the while I'm slideshow presenting, then I can't see your hand up. So somebody needs help. Perhaps Steve, you can make sure that you bring people in. Yeah. When I'm not presenting, I mean, when we're just talking, then I'll come back to everybody's pictures. Okay, so Here we are, January 2026, and it feels like the rug gets pulled out under our feet about every 20 minutes when you look at the news. And so I decided, let's actually work out whether we're still tackling risk in the right way. I've been, as Steve said, involved in risk for something like getting on for 40 years now as my main job. And it has changed over time, and in some ways it's not changed enough. But I think in the current climate, we really do need to be thinking how we're going to approach it. So when I started thinking about this presentation, I put together a whole bunch of just words. I just gathered them all and thought, there's lots and lots of things we're dealing with at the moment. This is really the context of risk. I know within all of your organizations, whoever you work for, wherever you are in the world, you may have very specific things. But I think one of the things I'd like us to think about today is the context we live in, because we can no longer think of risk purely as single events, things that are purely impacting us in a bubble. We live in a very uncertain world, and so we can be thrown all over the place. And so the risks that we are managing sit in a bigger ecosystem of risks that we need to contemplate. And interestingly, last week, what popped up was the World Economic Forum, a new top 10 risk report that they brought out. In fact, it's more than 10, the top N risks. And one of the things that's quite close to my heart is how risks are connected. And if you've seen the World Economic Forum reports before, you'll know that they do this connecting risk type of thing. And one of the things they came up with here, this is just looking at how inequality is and societal polarization are the most connected risks they have in their view of overall risk across the world at the moment, which is quite interesting. Well, it's interesting to me anyway. Hope it is to you as well. But I think really what I'm focused on here is how risks have become increasingly interconnected, and that's my first conversation topic that I'd like to raise and ask the question. So get ready. I want everybody to get involved. How should we change the way we identify risks, issue, and uncertainty? Because in the past, it's been very process-based. We go through, we do look at the context. If you consider ISO 31000 or APM or any of the risk processes, PMI and so on, we consider the context and then we start identifying risks. And generally, people think of risks first of all in a negative way, but here you can see I'm talking about threat and opportunity, but they also think of them as risk events. And actually, I think we need to be considering things very broadly, because many of the risks that we talk about are today more like issues. They are actually happening to us. It's just timing and context that we need to consider, and also uncertainty, which is kind of, how you define that can be different in different organizations, but we really need to consider all of those three things. So is anybody would like to open the conversation and tell me, perhaps start with, how do you identify risks at the moment? Yeah, Becky.
Yeah,
Can you unmute?
I'm unmuted. I see that a lot of my clients, especially the larger clients that work internationally, are starting to do, it's almost like string theory for their risk management. And the trigger metrics for various types of risks have been thrown out the window. Anything almost can trigger something if you're working internationally. And that's becoming more and more significant for these organizations. Some of them are even considering restructuring so that they have less impact from international aspects and are more country-centric or regional-centric, if I'm talking about the EU. rather than trying to deal broadly with risks across international borders. But literally, it's becoming more of a string theory sort of diagramming of risks. And then behind that, you have all the other material that we normally do. But identification, you have to identify connectivity anymore. It's not just something you might have done, it's something that you have to do now.
Yeah. Daryl, you've got your hand up.
Yes, especially today, I see AI more as a risks issue and also an opportunity because we are in the time of separating or maybe combining AI agents as digital coworkers. So having that type of concept in our workforce it touches a lot with risks, opportunities, and issues as well.
Yeah, I think that's a major thing. There were, going back to 2005 when we were working on the guide, that the APM guide Steve was talking about, I remember having whole meetings where we debated what an issue was and argued about the nitty gritty about, in my opinion, what was stupid things really. An issue, a risk, an opportunity is kind of whatever it means to you. It doesn't, you know, they and increasingly, as you say, Daryl, I think they're almost interchangeable. You cannot see AI as anything but all three of them, because it has so many overarching contexts and implications in all the different things we do that we really need to just classifying them as any one thing is almost impossible. And I remember in the days when we started putting together risk and opportunity pictures of, you know, matrices, and no matter, I mean, I know a lot of people hate them, love them, hate them, whatever you like. A risk is a traffic light system, and it's the way people kind of identify stuff. But you know, we had risks that could span opportunity all the way through to risk and issue as well. And I think, Ian, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian. On mute.
I just eventually got round to clicking. A slightly different spin on that, not so much changing the way how we identify risks, but maybe changing the importance of identifying specific risks. So getting more of a balance away from trying to predict exactly what will happen, but making our processes and systems more robust and anti-fragile, so that we know something will come along. We just don't know what in the future. And therefore, not trying to be overly deterministic and removing protection from uncertainty of our project management practices and processes, but, you know, allowing the flexibility to adapt to the conditions in the future that we'll only have a general understanding on. So I think that has a role to play. That's not ignore trying to identify specific risks, issues, uncertainties, but getting a balance between not worrying too much about exactly what, but, you know, like cars are designed with shock absorbers, but you don't worry about exactly where the potholes will be and what will have caused them. You just know there'll be a bump somewhere.
Yeah, I think and that brings us on to a sort of perhaps a discussion about resilience. Yeah, my concern was that for the last 10, 15, 20 years, resilience has really been focused on compliance. You know, and the fact that trying to put processes and procedures in place in order to put tram lines around what you can do, it can be very rigid and it can miss the point, because, like you say, you don't know what you're going to hit in the future. So while compliance is very important, and I wouldn't argue that you should not be putting in place compliance processes, I think that resilience really needs to be a much bigger and wider topic that people understand in a broader way. And I think the pandemic kind of helped us, or helped me at least, understand a bit more or think more widely about resilience, because resilience to me is more about pivoting, and being in a position where you've thought about the various different potential things that might happen. So you're not trying to pin it down to a very explicit risk. You're making it much broader and thinking much more widely about how you respond to it. And resilience is not necessarily about coming back to. I mean, yeah, I think the definition of resilience is making sure you come back to a steady state, or that you're resistant to change. And actually, sometimes with risk, we need to embrace change. We need to go with it. We need to pivot and keep our eyes on the long term.
Yeah.
So I think that flexibility is really important.
Yeah, that's the archetypal examples of Toyota manufacturing in their supply chain. That they didn't have a risk of a tsunami in Japan or the floods, I think, in Indonesia, which took out some factories. However, they recovered from them much, much, much faster than their competitors did, and other industries, because they knew something like that could happen. And they had strategic protective capacity in their network. And projects can do the same, but as you say, many sort of miss the trick, focus on compliance rather than business objectives, outcomes, and value. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Becky.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm seeing, because I work with a lot of contractors that do work for the government, is that they complain they're not allowed to put in that cushioning that to allow them to be resilient. They're not allowed to modify a process to allow them to actually recover when something happens. And that in and of itself is causing other risks for them. And I think that's something that's just not talked a lot about, is when you have a customer who does not recognize resilience as something that needs to be inherent within your system. And I think that that's an area that actually deserves a lot more study as to how that's impacting our economies moving forward. We cannot remain rigid. And resilience is just one of the ways that we can absorb change and actually accommodate change. And we talk a lot about change, but we don't talk about the things that can enable change as much as we should. Thank you.
Yeah. Steve, were you wanting to?
Yeah, I just wanted to, so Matthew, is it okay if I just jump in quickly? We'll come to you next.
Sure.
I think what Becky just said triggered me a little. I've been thinking again about what happens almost before risks are sat down and identified. And I've also been struggling with the iron triangle, and what was initially said on the membership card of the APM, the Association for Project Management, is that project management was the management of change being the operative word. And more I'm beginning to think, well, is it change? Is the iron triangle something that we should make more permeable for a start? And secondly, is it really more about the management of choice? And the words context and choice kind of sit, and should there be more discussion, more attention played to the contexts and the choices that are opened up because of the context, either before we start identifying the risks or when we're limbering up to say we're going to be discussing risk, but what is the context of these things? Because often they're a list on a register, and you don't really know. And I think that quite often the contextual discussion around the choices that are available and the directions that they can lead to can also lead into the kinds of the ways that risks are identified and dealt with. Or maybe they should be more context around them so that we can understand them better. build-in resilience. And one final point, which is a little bit off kilter, but I remember some of us remember the Alex Rodriguez from Portugal, who was a risk specialist, I think, and participated in quite a lot of the conversation we've had over the years on risk. He used to differentiate risk into two categories. One was critical risks and one was crucial. I can't begin to tell you what the difference was, but he had split them into the two, crucial and critical. And maybe again, is that something that's used, employed? I don't know, but maybe you do, Val.
Shall I just give my quick tuppence on that, and then we'll bring Matthew in? I think critical versus crucial. It's a little bit like in schedule risk. Critical is more about the probability of something happening. Like if you're on the critical path, you're certain that you're, that anything you do on that critical path is going to impact, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to impact by very much. But crucial is more about the impact. I know that that's a bit of a simplistic view of it, but it's generally how people and how I've worked with customers on trying to identify, and weed out the less important, because sometimes you might have a tiny probability but a huge impact. That would be a crucial risk, because it might not get onto your radar because the tiny probability cancels it out.
Okay, well, I get that. So should we move on to what Matthew's got to say, and then we'll come back to the question.
Great debate, and I guess my point was coming at it very narrowly from the question that's asked about the identification piece, because most of the projects at the moment you kind of generate very bottoms up. I think there's better opportunities to use a lot more kind of databases, AI, that type of stuff, to do that parallel or benchmarking type approach. But thinking about the context of the interconnection, I think we've got to come at it from a slightly different angle, because what we're trying to do here is really try to create almost like a digital twin of whatever project, program or portfolio we're analysing at an appropriate level that's understandable. So if things are becoming more interconnected, then by the very nature of it, we have to bring it up a level to make it more understandable, to make it be able to articulate and the cause and effect and the impact and the mitigation plans. So by things becoming more complex and interconnected, by the very nature of it from a modelling perspective, we're going to have to bring it up a level to make it understandable. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes, no, I think that's a very good point. And I think I'm not trying to paraphrase, and because you're not quite saying top down, it's actually all levels that you need to take a view of. And I think this is where one of the things that one of the working groups that I'm on, and then Becky's on, maybe some other people on this group are looking into project, program and portfolio, and there are different needs at each of those levels to bring in the risk conversation and the interconnection connectivity sits across everything. It sits across risks, but it sits across all of the elements of trying to achieve anything in a business, trying to achieve strategic objectives. And I think what Steve was saying about focusing on the outcomes and we need to make sure that we're delivering benefits. But if we're only sitting on a little bubble and not understanding all the other things that can impact, then we are probably going to get sideswiped by something quite quickly. Okay, we've got David.
Hi all. It's my first time to the Conversation Club, so thanks Steve for the opportunity to have a chat. I think one of the interesting things for us is that we're starting to look at AI's application around the risk perimeter at the moment, and what we're finding is that actually if you can create some information which tries to do some analysis around the risks that you currently have, you can start building some AI solutions which then start looking at the risks and form a quantitative opinion about whether they're good or not. One of the biggest problems we're finding is that risk reviews, for example, are just not working, and as a consequence, over the term of a project, trying to get new risks established, trying to identify what the success rate is with the mitigation actions, etc., it all takes tremendous time. And it's a tremendous potential budget as well that we could recover as an organisation if we were able to do that robustly. So I think as an industry, set of industries, I think there is a lot of premise around AI and the opportunities it brings, but we're on the early cusp. And we are playing. I think a lot of people are starting to play with it now. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, question, other ways that we can identify risks. I think AI will have a very, very interesting part to play in this. I think the challenge will be is making it real and ensuring that the clarity, the accuracy, the credibility is maintained. So yeah, that's my 3 pence worth, if I may.
Yeah, okay, I'm looking at time, and thanks, David. I think that's a really valid point. We will move on to the next question. Just a, if I may, a brief response to that, because I've been implementing risk systems with customers for the last 35 plus years. And I think anything we can get to help us identify risks is fantastic. And anything we can get to help us do that more quickly is also really, really important. We do have some massive challenges in risk in the AI space, I think, partly because the data we have is rubbish historically. Nobody does any updating the risk register after a risk has happened generally, or when I say nobody, very rarely. So we don't actually know the outturn of risks usually because it gets passed over to somebody actually having to do something. I also think that there is a danger that we predicate the future on the basis of the past, and therefore if we only look, it's one of the reasons why some of the historic systems have failed, like optimism bias, because it just said, well, if it looks like a project in the past, then this is how we should cost and budget for it. And in fact, the answer is, well, why don't we make the projects different in the future and not just try and give it more budget because these sort of projects failed in the past. On the other hand, we need to take all the data we have and then interrogate it really, really carefully and try to improve the quality of the data we're working with. So AI is here to stay, and we are going to need to learn how to work with it. Okay, I do have. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
We're certainly having some fun learning and understanding how it works.
Yeah.
The opportunities. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on because I want to be able to get through all 3 questions. There was just one thought I had against this, and actually I've found it has worked very well in working with customers, is that one of the ways that you can think about increasingly interconnected risk, and it comes back to I think Becky's string theory, is that if you constantly think of what's causing this, why is it happening, then it can help you consider all of the interconnections. And of course, the impact is also what could my risk cause as well. And I can't remember who was saying it. There was another comment about the fact that it's very difficult to pin risks down. Maybe it was Ian saying it. And so we really need to think broadly about pin down what we can, but make sure that we keep an open mind to how things might change in the future. So we're identifying risks, issues and uncertainty in the broadest sense that we can, so we don't get caught out by the other things in the context around us. Okay, so we're going to move on. So carrying on with the World Economic Forum report, I found it very interesting that they looked at the 2-year horizon and the 10-year horizon. There is a link there if you want to go and look at this. This is very, very recent, and I think one of the things they're trying to do is get some of this information in front of people in the Davos meeting that's coming up shortly. But the interesting thing I find here is that just looking at the colours without trying to read all the words, environmental risk, and in particular climate change, is seen as something in the 10-year horizon, whereas many of the more things that are impacting us immediately, of course, are in the 2-year horizon: geopolitical, societal, technological as well. We're looking at the future. And one of the things that I wanted to pose as a question is the time aspect of risk, and in particular, the fact that the pace of change has increased in the past 10, 50, well, it just keeps on moving faster and faster. And we hit 2026, not thinking what might happen in the next few months or year or few years. We're thinking what might happen in the next week or two or tomorrow. And it's really hard to manage risk in that context of just not knowing what's going to happen tomorrow. Because the main thing that I want to focus on here is how do we respond to risk? Because response has a very, very important aspect of timing. Because if you don't respond to a risk in time, it's going to hit you. It might not hit you for 10 years, but if you need to respond to it today, then you know it's going to turn into an issue and it's going to be a major problem. And it's also cheaper to deal with it today than next year or the year after. Usually, that's typically, it's much more costly to fix your house if you do it when you're building the foundations than wait until you've got the walls and the roof on. So how do we, what new approaches do we need to take to responding to risk? So if we've got anybody who's because this is what it's all about, is response. Yeah, Becky.
Sorry, it tried to cover up my microphone and I couldn't get it to open. One of the things that we've started working with some of the clients on is, yes, you're predicting the risk might actually happen 9 months from now, whatever. But how can I seed the response now? What can I do to try to avoid as much of the impact as possible now? And when I look at that chart of yours that you had from the report, one of the things that sort of causes my heart to pick up a bit of a pace here is that it looks like what we have is things that we view as critical now, things that we view as going to be catastrophic 10 years from now. And I'm not sure that should drive our mode of dealing with risk. I think we have to start planning both short-term horizon as well as long-term, because many of these risks can be catastrophic for any organization. I mean, literally, it can bring your work to a halt. So I think thinking of risk not as, well, when it occurs, this is what I have to do, or just before the actual trigger metric pops up, here's what I'm going to put into place. We have to start putting stuff into place earlier. And that gives us some of that resilience that Ian spoke of. If we're not doing planning for risks and implementing things to reduce the impact or hopefully avoid the impact, which seldom happens, I think we're missing the boat. Risk is something that has to start way early. An organization has to start talking about their organizational risk earlier so that the projects and programs have something to hook onto also. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there is a challenge with that kind of thing, that most organizations budget in single financial years. One of the things I was really interested to read about recently is people, there are some camps that are starting to say that the next financial crisis may be caused by the vast amount of private equity that is going into corporations at the moment, and the fact that just like the subprime mortgage problem in 2008 was actually a whole load of connected loans from all the banks. Private equity firms are also hugely indebted, and the fact that we tend to build problems and they gestate over a long period of time, without people realizing. And a lot of the challenges we have with risk response is people don't want to spend money today or even tomorrow. They want to leave it until, it's the net present value of money. If you can not spend it today or tomorrow, or and push it back to next year, keep it in the bank, use it for something else, well, that's okay if you can justify that the expense, using that funding is going to build solid revenue and a solid business. That's fine, as long as you're mindful of the potential downside later on. But unfortunately, financial, a lot of the time, and maybe you have different experience of the organisations you're in, but most of the organisations I come across, risk sits in the financial part of the business, and they hold the purse strings, so they don't want to spend money that's only hypothetical, against something hypothetical. Rod, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, there's a sort of a slight variance on that, and sometimes it's even worse than that, where it's to do with silo mentality. If I don't need to deal with that risk because I'll not do that in capital because I'll let revenue pick up the consequences. And also, sometimes it's just people's personalities or cultures in a company, whereas it's like the Davos thing, those ones in 10 years' time, in a way, all those people that are there probably, apart from maybe Putin and Trump, won't be actually in charge in 10 years' time. So they're not interested. They'll people will pretend. And you get that in companies as well. They'll do what they'll do to get the project done, knowing that they're not going to be around. They've got their bonus, they're gone. So there's a culture piece that we need to try and get into companies to resolve as well, to get out of that.
Yes. Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think silo mentality may be something we come back to in the next question. But yes, there is a grave danger that people see it as it might be, if it's caused by them, but it's not impacting them, impacting somebody else. Maybe you keep quiet about it. There is, because it's easier just to keep your head down. Yeah, we've got Andy.
Yeah, hi everyone. First time on this call, so thanks for having me. One of the things that may be of interest that we're doing at work, been doing for a number of years now, is we're having a category of strategic risk, and this is a risk where one of the reasons that we would be strategic is it's outside of the scope of your influence on your project. So it's very hard to deal with risks like that. And the idea is during the bid phase, that we identify these risks that are strategic because they have, maybe they're black swan, maybe they have huge impacts, but generally they're things that the project can't handle alone. And then we conduct a deep dive on the risk handling. So a workshop with very seniors attending and people from different functions and different backgrounds. And the idea being that problem shared is a problem halved. So you've really publicized these risks to the wider business, and you've got joint ownership, you've got joint responsibility for these risks, and you've enabled the placement of mitigation actions on people that normally you have no contact with, and you can place actions on people that are very senior, up to like CEO levels and things like that. And then it's refreshed once a year as well on the project. So we're making these strategic risk reviews as mandatory on any of our projects that or bids that we consider to be critical bids that are high profile, bids that are similar to ones that maybe gone wrong in the past, etc. So I think that's quite a good way of dealing with those risks is to have that high visibility. You can't hide from them, and you get access to people that maybe would never even know about these risks, and they actually start to help you with them.
I think that's a very good point. I think some of the best and most enjoyable projects I've worked on have involved senior management doing senior risk masterclasses, working with them, holding a mirror up to them and saying, yep. This is not just something you kick down the line. And then and then expect people to dig themselves out of. There is there's often things that you can do at senior management level that at a lower level you have no authority to do. But if you don't know about it, then, and it's a two-way thing, people at a lower level need to inform, and there needs to be a space in which you can do that to senior management, so senior management knows what's going on, but they need to be receptive to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you get what you incentivize, and sometimes maybe you need someone very senior to change what they're telling someone senior to do. Like, you must win all three of those. Well, there's a ramification to that, and if we can convince the senior person to say, actually, let's just go for two of them instead, then they're going to be two successful rather than three failures.
Yep. Yes, indeed. Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether I misheard Andy. They only review this once a year, though, at the strategic level?
No, that's correct. So we do normal risk management, which would include all of those in there, but the special handling of them is done once during the bid. If you win the contract, once again at the launch, and then it's refreshed once a year. It drives multiple actions. It goes through the normal risk management process after that point. But these touch points are to get you the touch time with the very seniors, which you could not expect to get more than once a year.
Yeah, we are the clients that I'm working with, we're having to review them much more often given the pace of change, whether it's the political climate, which being from the US is beyond the term volatile, or whether it's just various issues that you see playing out on the marketing front, or wherever you're actually deriving your benefits from the project. We're having to review those much more often. And one of the reasons for doing that is to allow the senior executives, as well as even the C-suite, to have more in-depth discussions about how we can look for opportunities. There's a lot of sharing of the threat risk, but very little, sharing or transferring of the opportunities. How can we enable that to happen? And given the pace of change, opportunities spring up, and if you don't jump on them, they're gone. And you need to have that senior executive C-suite support in order to take advantage of many of those. So we're having to do it much more often. So I was sort of taken aback by the 1 year. So that's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Rod, can we bring you in?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So another thing I found quite helpful is when you classify the risks as project, so, the action and the consequences lives in the project to be managed, and then systemic, which, might affect the project, but it's from outside, might be the company's culture or something like that, or something that they would deal with. And then there's the environmental, but not in the kind of green trees environmental, the stuff like the COVIDs, stuff that's outside the company, outside the project, but the causes, that is, but the impact, will hit the project. And doing that, I found really helpful, so that you can say, right, that's a project risk, that's down to you, Mr. PM, and your team. Strategic ones, right, okay, that's you, Mrs. CEO, and your exec to manage that. And then similar with the environmental ones, right, that means there's nothing we can do about the calls, but it's you senior folks that are going to have to deal with that, how we're going to respond to that. Some of the stuff Ian was talking about, the question mark that's going to hit the car, the bump. So that's another good way of classifying them as well, and also stops projects having crazy risks sat in their risk register about things that they can't do anything about, and you have massive contingency funds. So I'll just chuck that in the mix for people.
Yeah, I think it's it's a great point, and I think it comes back to what you were saying about multiple levels before, that a project does not exist in a bubble, and much wider perspective is needed, which I think is what Eileen is saying in the chat as well. But that does need budgets that are available at different levels, and they also sometimes need budgets to move between those levels. Yeah, okay, so we've got Douglas. Can we invite
Yes,
you
hi.
in?
Thanks very much. I'm representing the Canadian delegation here. I just want to comment briefly because I see we're running out of time. First of all, pace of change has increased, maybe, maybe not. I think it varies. For those, if we look back in history, 100 years ago, the pace of change was probably greater than it is now. If you look at all the various inventions, wars, epidemics, etc., that were going on at that time, stock market crashes, who knows? Second point is that we really should be looking, well, I think we have been looking at, but haven't mentioned the fact that there's project risk, program risk, and portfolio risk. And these are three very different perspectives because, and I think business risk is in there, probably part of portfolio as well. But when I'm talking to my students, I tell them to always distinguish between project risk and business risk. I agree that risk can be both a threat and opportunity. I'm coming around in my thinking here. I still think that people tend to and probably should focus on threats more than opportunities because you're rarely fired for missing an opportunity. But I guess it could happen. The other point I want to make is that we haven't mentioned assumptions, and assumptions are key in project management, and they represent short-term stopgaps, ways of dealing with uncertainty, but they can come back to haunt you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one of the things that we've often, or I've often done, is work with teams and look at causes and assumptions at the same time, because an assumption is generally a cause of a risk. Yeah, great points. Ian.
Thanks, Val. I'll just pause typing a comment against something Douglas just said. An example about maybe a different approach to many projects from my experience back in the pharmaceuticals industry in the olden days, when owners used to have project management capability. And in one series of projects, you could call it a program, for a new drug that was coming to market, we knew that there was a long lead time engineering manufactured item that would be on the critical path. And time on pharmaceutical projects is worth a fortune when it's a new drug coming to market. So there's a lot of money involved in that. One of the risks we didn't know the specific risks. We knew the importance of a very particular global manufacturer based in Switzerland for this bit of technology that process needed. And our intervention was about enhancing the relationships between the companies. So, we didn't try and calculate the risk, but we knew if this company let us down, it could be a problem. And our risk response was about improve the relationships at multi-levels. So we encouraged and required that at a project level, but because there was a program dimension, our engineering functions related to this technology put more time and effort into our longer term key supplier relationships with this supplier. So did our senior global procurement people. And at the top level, we had, and this was a large global chemical company, the global director of engineering and projects. We got him to go out of his way to have a visit with this supplier, meet the owners, etc., just in case. So yeah. I don't know whether that's the sort of thing you mean by new or different approaches to risk, but it's one that touched on this other discussion that our projects were part of the business. So if the project risk was not a business risk, there's some mismatch somewhere. So
yes, yeah, and I mean those sort of responses are not necessarily new. but I think that what we're talking about here is considering a much broader view of how we respond to risk, rather than being quite myopic about applying some budget to it, and because it may not be budget that you need, it may be a different thinking and a different culture. Yeah, okay. And so I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Junshin.
Junshin, yes, as Junshin from, I just want to share what we do like inside will see for this sort of mega infrastructure projects. So, I mean, you mentioned about pace of change is increased. So our risk register is a living document. So we try to drive accountability at different levels. So the project manager and also the multidisciplinary team around the project manager should be keeping the risk register at their level. I mean, as a living document at all times. So you got, building system contracts and then sub-program level, project-wide strategic risks. And then we have a regular routine and to review it so that at each level it feeds up and to escalate items should it necessary, and understanding the dependencies between different ones to avoid some of the big ripple effects should it be happening. So the way how we do it is we have a Sizosy data platform. So your source risk system, which is ARM, we are using active risk management as our risk management platform. The data set we will ingest into our Sizosy data platform, where everybody across the business, as long as you have the right access based on your role, you should be able to access the risks at any point in time. So to maximize the visibility so that people can see the risks live changing along the journey, even outside the review cycles. By doing that, it's kind of has addressed the pace issue you just mentioned there, because it's a living document. We continuously reviewing it. When we see something happening, we can tweak our risk or opportunity to reflect accordingly. I just want to share this practice with everybody.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Zin. Yes, I think I mean, it's interesting. We've got quite a lot of comments saying, well, maybe the pace isn't, pace is not the biggest issue here, or the pace of change, because maybe it hasn't changed over time. But I still think that our focus, the whole point of risk management, is the action you do. It's the response you take to it, and the right access to the right information at the right levels is coming across to me as some of the most important parts. Steve, given we do need to move on, so
well, what do you think I'm going to do?
Move us on. Good.
Yeah. Although I would like to say we need to improve the quality of the response. It's all very well identifying these risks, but we have to say for something that's 10 years away, like environmental failure, there should be some kind of traffic light, the temperature gauge saying if we don't do something about it, because those risks will be evolving. They're not just stuck 10 years away at the same size. They will be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we've got to have something that enables us to see that and maybe set a threshold beyond which we don't go without doing something about it. But we must move on to question number 3, if there is a question number 3.
My thought on this is that one of the things that we need to do is consider scenario-based planning, and look at the readiness and decision making over a period of time, so that we actually are prepared no matter what the timescale we're looking at. We need to think bigger and think there are possibly multiple routes that the future could take.
Yep.
Okay,
Gotcha.
so my last question is that just like our conversation club, there may be many different and possibly conflicting perspectives on risk and how we deal with it. So the third question, which we may well go away and ponder, is how we reconcile personal, public and enterprise risk. And we did focus a little on this when we talked about silos. There are issues if we don't share risk across the different areas of a business, across a project. We might work in a very narrow and myopic way in our own bubble. And I think one of the things that came across in the comments as well is that we can focus on one particular sort of risk. And my experience is on some projects I've seen too much focus on technical risk in a project, and not enough on the softer issues, like Ian was talking about, making sure that people are working together, collaborating, focusing on the end game, as opposed to purely looking at the specific technical side of things. And of course, we sit within the context of the business we're in, and who we're delivering to. So yeah, anybody got thoughts on that? Would like to comment on how we might address the different perspectives that different people in an organization will have on risk? Or maybe people want to get on the road or get to their dinner, because I'm keeping people from or lunch or whatever time zone you're in.
Well, I hope we can give it another 10 minutes at least.
Yeah. Okay. Rebecca.
Becky.
Yeah. One of the things that I have encountered, and I'm presuming others have encountered, is the fact that in order to take in and achieve any type of reconciliation, we have to be able to listen. And that just doesn't happen all the time, because we are so caught up in whatever is happening in our positional sphere rather than the broader picture, that we don't listen. And it's very, very difficult to achieve any type of reconciliation or step forward if we don't listen. So we're not listening to personal. We claim we listen to the public by doing surveys and marketing forums, etc. But oftentimes we look at them to reinforce whatever our positional issues are. So I think that I hate the term softer skills because they're actually the hardest skills we have to master. So I think that we need to talk more about those skills and understand how difficult they are to attain to actually achieve what we want to achieve.
Yes, I think here what we often sit in an environment where we have characters who are let me say potentially quite opinionated and not ready to listen to other people's ideas. It's one of the things that I've worked hard on, is to look at how to improve diversity. And by diversity, I don't mean necessarily the pure gender or other types of the definition of diversity, but actually have people who are very diverse in their thinking. Trying to engage people in the room who are who sit and don't say much for a long time. Often they can come out with a nugget at some point, which is absolutely fundamental to the way that we think about the problem in hand. And problem solving is all about getting a bunch of people together, in my opinion. Generally, no one person has the answer to a knotty problem. Usually sitting and talking about it is one of the best ways of addressing and achieving an outcome that is going to be beneficial, whether it's to project, business, the benefits that you're trying to realize, because everybody has an opinion. I think the other aspect of the personal side of risk management is that we need to recognize that people have their own career, their own self-preservation in mind when they put their hand up or don't put their hand up, because they don't want to look foolish. They have their own interests in mind, and sometimes if we don't recognize the dynamics of all the people who are involved in decision making, then we can be sideswiped by the fact that there are people who are not coming up with things that they know about. They're keeping them to themselves. So it's a very big dynamic. The competition between different functions, different departments, people who fear retribution, or just don't want to be the first person to put their hand up and admit something. Andrew, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi Val. It was basically just picking up on your very last point and drawing that back to, talking to those people who maybe aren't from the UK who might not be familiar. But if we look at the couple of examples that touch on what you said earlier about private equity, we've got a situation now where we can look at the Horizon IT program that affected the post office in the UK and led to people killing themselves and being imprisoned, and I mean some of the most horrendous outcomes from a failed project or program. And then you've also got the incentivization that's occurred through the ownership of our utilities, particularly water, where you've got a very short-term, very financially orientated focus. And I think that, I mean, I haven't got any answers to offer, but what my observation is that those people that are in positions of the greatest power of decision making are far from better than us. They are quite simply motivated to look after whatever it is that they deem important. And my big concern is that we see, going back to your World Economic Forum and your kind of 2-year time horizon risks and the 10-year one, is that everybody seems to, at the moment, to be moving more towards concern about the here and now than the longer term. And I do wonder that this ability to kind of kick problems down the road and just, stick our fingers in our ears and scream la 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 because, we can deny whatever it is and it won't happen now. I just wonder at what point do we get to a situation where all of the issues, technical issues, financial issues, relationship issues, public opinion issues, they all start to become a bit more acute and pressing on us. I'm kind of getting a sense that that's starting to occur. And I don't know. I know that these things operate against different clock speeds, which is a phrase I'm very keen on. But I do feel that all the clocks that we're watching are sort of starting to speed up. I just don't know whether that's an opinion that I'm kind of getting from a bit of the sidelines or whether it's something that others are feeling at the same time as me.
Yes. Has anybody got any thoughts on that? I mean, my view is that there is still a problem that whistleblowing has never been career enhancing, and also that timing, often people will just sit on something and hope it goes away, or sit on it knowing that it'll go away. There are many people who've not been brought to justice because so much time has gone by, including in some of the the examples that you've just given, because they've retired, they've moved on, and it is a problem with projects that if you don't address things quickly, people see the writing on the wall and they will move on, and that's undermining and a risk to the project in itself. Becky.
Yeah, I find it, and I think Andrew stated what I was trying to state much better, but I do think that we do have a problem where people are just looking at things from their position. And I I think that we also, it depends on what sector you're working in, how fast you see change moving. And I think that as to your comment about the whistleblowers, we have made it so we talk a lot about how much we admire people who bring issues forward, but I think socially we really don't, because we don't like boats to be rocked, because that actually can increase risk. And so if an issue is brought out, if it's made public, whatever, it rocks the boat, it causes more risk for organizations. So I think we need to change the way we approach whistleblowing, and I think we need to actually, as organizations and others, we need to put in safety nets for those who bring issues forward, because they actually do a lot of good. You'll see organizations change after a whistleblower, but the whistleblower then becomes pillared out in the public sector. So we need to change our thinking, and some of that is also a change in our thinking about risk, because oftentimes people who bring forward the hard risk, the risk that's going to require financial outlay, the risk that's going to require people to not be so concerned about their position, but the position of the overall organization, we tend to discount them. We try to shut them up. We try to move them to the corner. So I think there's a lot of change that needs to happen in order for us to actually act on a lot of this stuff. And that has to happen at the top. Thanks.
Yeah, yes, I agree, Becky, and that brings me to my my comment on this, is that it's really important that we make it safe for people to have risk conversations, and that has to start from the top. Because if you don't trust the person above you that they're telling the truth, or bringing out the things you know they know about, then you won't talk either. So, and unless we're talking about risk and having those really important conversations, then we're not going to actually get to the we aren't even going to get to identify risk, let alone work out how to respond to the risks. And so, I love the comment Eileen's put in the chat, that PMI have renamed soft skills as power skills, because I think that it's empowering people to tell the truth and come clean and not be, not shooting the messenger for coming forward, is, I think, really important. Steve, perhaps we should get to a point where we can wrap up.
I don't know whether we've answered your questions, Val, but I think we've opened up discussion.
Yes, but that's what conversations are about.
That's
and
very true.
Often you have to go away and think about it, and listening is as important as talking. Having conversations are what help deal with risk, identify them, and work out how to solve problems. And one of the great things is people love solving problems. They really do. But we can only solve problems if we are honest and bring them together in conversation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree to a degree that the upper echelons of power should. Oleg's just turned up. The upper echelons of power should help facilitate these changes, but I also, in a way, kind of disagree that change can still start with the individual, and you can build communities, and you can build movements, and you can build forces for change that don't necessarily come from the top. Dare I say, that's how revolutions start. And maybe we do need to become more revolutionary in our approach, but without being aggressive or warlike or overclaiming what power can do. But a broader consensus, a kind of bigger, greater good needs to be latched onto, I think, in our thinking. And I think maybe Andrew might agree that we appear to have got crueler, shorter tempered, shorter fuses with the way that we deal with things, and particularly some of the examples that are being set us at the moment are not good examples of how we should practice the way that we behave with each other as well. The opportunity to have a more open-ended, safer conversation here, I think, will be a good example. And above all, that thing about listening and safe spaces, I think, is absolutely paramount and essential to work towards. And if I may offer somebody to listen to, who I have listened to for the past few years, is that philosopher geezer, Rutger Bergman, Dutch. He did what we call our wreath lectures, did 3 of them, I think, just before Christmas. Had to take out a few comments because of the some censorship going on, or some too freely expressed opinions. But it would be worth tracking those down. I might put the link to those. They're still online, and I'll put them into the output that we get from this particular meeting. So I am going to, I think, draw it to a close if you're content to do so, Val.
Yeah, I have one last build, which is to say, actually, we shouldn't just be thinking about time to thinking differently. We should be having more conversations differently about risk.
And turning thought into action as well. You know, we've got to get it beyond just talking about it and thinking about it. Although you can't do the action stuff until you've thought about it and discussed it and gained some kind of consensus, I suppose. It's what we do in the standards world. Even if we don't always agree, we accept and we find ways of going through it. So I'm going to close the session now for time, but I do appreciate that this could have gone on for, as I said, until next Thursday probably. But lots of material. We shall have to revisit these topics, I think, in the nearest future. All of this stuff will be gathered together and redistributed probably early next week to land on your desk, or maybe even by the end of this week we'll get something out to everybody who's attended the conversation and those that are in the conversation club generally. Anything else to say? Well, the next meeting, I believe, Becky, is scheduled for April the 14th. Now, did you know what happened on April the 14th, 1860 in America? Well, I'll tell you. The first Pony Express rider reached Sacramento. So the quiz question is, where did he start from? If it was a he, it might have been Doris Day for all I know. And hopefully by the time he gets there on 14th of April 2025, he'll be carrying some good news, maybe some answers to what we've been talking to today as well. So I'm going to draw a line on that. Thank everybody's attendance. Thank CPM and ourselves for gathering together. A really good topic and one that bears elaboration and expansion. So thank you again, and see you on April the 14th. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you
Dave.
for joining us.
Everybody.
Yeah. If you want
Bye.
to stick around for a few seconds, Val.
Yep, sure.
That's good. So I don't know where Oleg came from. Maybe he got the clock wrong. Perhaps it's the wrong
Maybe.
time in Turkey. Yeah, there he is. Or Alec. Well, that was interesting, Val. Good session.
Good.
Lots to discuss, but I really do think it broadens the discussion to take it to bigger levels. Sociological, societal, you know, the whole thing. So we're going to have to think of a follow-up, I think.
Yeah, I think increasingly, and it was one of the comments that came out, I think is quite interesting that risk has become much more multi-level than it was. It used to be, and of course, you know, it was born out of the fact that everybody just stuck their risk register on Excel and they all had their 10 risks or whatever it was that they were managing in their own little space. And I think that there's a there's a recognition as people have grown up with risk and gone perhaps into more senior management levels, that while you still need to have those discussions in your own, within four walls, within your own groups, you then need to share and be able to see other people's risks in order to have a real...
And to your point, that people don't follow up with the stuff, do they, once they've been kind of dealt with?
Yeah, I mean, there is almost no lessons learned is a massively difficult thing to do, but even just recording what happened on a risk, because you often think, well, we haven't managed it yet, and then later on, once you've dealt with it, you've almost forgotten that it was a risk in the first place. It's become an issue, and then it gets worked through, and nobody really knows how much you spent on it or who, what the answer was. So, that, and I do, it's one of the things that I have skepticism about AI is the ability to use any useful training data from a risk point of view or any data mine. I mean, if you're just data mining, it's not really AI. You're just, you're just unless you're using something like Chat GPT. But if you're really training it on stuff, then where's the data going to come from? Not good enough.
So lots more to do, I think.
Yeah, indeed.
So, which is a good thing. We haven't solved it, but we'll, as you said, carry it forward.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Well, so good stuff. I shall stop recording now, and as I said, I'll chop it up for distribution, and as I said, hopefully share it by the end.